Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the To-Do List. I'm your host, Eric Fisher, and this week I'm excited to welcome back to the show Melissa Urban. She's the author of the brand new book, The New Whole30, a fresh approach to food and life. She's the co-creator and CEO of the Whole30 program. And in this new book, she talks about how the Whole30 program has been updated based on recent science, as well as making it more accessible. We also talk a bit about boundaries in wellness, drawing from her book, The Book of Boundaries, where she explores the role of boundaries in improving relationships, mental health, and showing that the Whole30 is a boundary bootcamp for better self-awareness and confidence. If you missed that conversation, don't worry, I'll link up to it in the show notes. If you've done a Whole30, or if you've heard of the Whole30, or if you're interested in having a better relationship with boundaries, you're going to love this conversation with Melissa Urban. Well, this week, it is my privilege to welcome back to the show Melissa Urban. Melissa, welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List.
Thank you for having me back. I've been looking forward to this.
I have been too. I remember you were here, it was like 2 years ago, 2022, I think. And hey, it was this book about boundaries. And I'm like, a book about boundaries? Okay, I guess. But then I realized who it was from, and I realized how it was attached to the thing you were more known for at the time, and probably still always more known for, is the Whole30. So we talked about the book of boundaries, Set the Limits That Will Set You Free, is I think the exact title. Mm-hmm. And that's such an amazing concept. It kind of goes into that whole, well, you say no so that you can say yes to the right things. And in a sense, that's what the Whole30 is all about too. So I'm glad you're back to talk about the new Whole30. Let's wrap all this up again. Like, obviously, we did a little spiel last time about the Whole30 and what it is. Let's start there. Then let's talk a little bit about boundaries, and then we'll go back to the new Whole30. How about that?
I love that. That sounds great. So I describe the Whole30 as a short-term elimination and reintroduction program. So it's not a weight loss diet. It's not a detox. It's not a cleanse. It's not even a prescriptive diet, in that we are not telling you how you should eat. We are a tool to help you figure out the foods that work best for you. So you eliminate for 30 days foods that are commonly problematic to varying degrees across a broad range of people, and see what happens. What happens to your energy, your sleep, your cravings, your digestion, your anxiety and allergies and asthma. All of these things can be directly influenced by the food that you eat. At the end of those 30 days, you bring those food groups back one at a time, very carefully and systematically, like a scientific experiment, and you compare your experience. So at the end of the Whole30, you will have this personalized blueprint that tells you the foods that work best in your unique system, and then you go on to apply that in your life however you see fit, and we call that your food freedom.
And I love that it's systematic. I love that it's kind of, not just kind of, it's pretty scientific in terms of its approach. It's you're paring everything back, going for, minimal as you can without losing any of the fun or the flavor of food, obviously, or else nobody would do this. And I've heard so many people say that they have done it for a while there, to the point where I was like, oh, that's the new fad diet. And then I realized through you that is not true. And I was glad to hear that. And so that was very encouraging. Obviously, that limiting, that putting up of boundaries kind of speaks to that other book, The Book of Boundaries. That has more to do with, that can do with food, but that has a lot to do with just all of life, whereas the Whole30 really is just food, and how then food affects all of life, obviously. So
yes, that's correct. Yeah.
You found a lot of, I know we had a bunch of different fun kind of stories that, stepped out or leaped out from not only your own personal experience from setting those boundaries and the healthy lifestyle holistically that you found when it came to relationships and everything else. I know you probably also, as the book came out, heard lots of great stories of people that, as they applied boundaries to their life, they started to thrive in ways they didn't think that they could. Any of those stick out to you that you maybe could share?
I have so many, because as we are recording this, we're heading into, or like smack in the middle of the holiday season. And I've been talking a lot about boundaries around the holiday season, whether you're setting boundaries around gift giving, who you will exchange with, the dollar amount you will exchange with, whether you will exchange at all, or setting boundaries around how you're going to spend your holiday. Like, we will not be traveling this year for our holiday, but you're welcome to come to us. And, I'm sharing that with often parents who have kids, and it's really hard for them to pack up, and maybe you don't have many days off and you really want to spend that holiday enjoying yourself. I just got a direct message from someone literally like an hour ago who said, your boundary advice really gave me the courage I needed to tell my parents and my in-laws, we will not be traveling this year. They have a newborn baby, it turns out. She has a newborn baby, and she wants Christmas morning at home with just her husband and her baby. So she said to her parents and in-laws, we won't be seeing you on Christmas Day, but we would love to visit with you at some point around Christmas. Like, let us know what works for you. Both of her sets of parents responded beautifully. They were like, yeah, that sounds great. How about the weekend before? How about the weekend after? And the sense of relief that I could feel through this direct message was palpable. She was so happy that she was able to provide a holiday kind of routine that worked for everybody. So I think those messages are so fun to receive, and I get them all the time.
I think it's funny that you just mentioned that one, because a friend of mine has a grown son who's out of college and just recently married earlier this year. And so this is their first Christmas as a married couple. And he made sure to let his son know, you do not have the pressure of us expecting you here on the day. Great to see you at some point if you can make it, but don't expect that pressure from us. And I just thought, I remember early newlywed first couple of Christmases when I was trying to figure out how to not offend anybody or rub anybody the wrong way. And wish that I'd had somebody like my friend who would have said that to me as my father. So
yeah, I think, a lot of family dynamics are starting to change. My mom's generation didn't feel like they could say no. She didn't feel like she could say no to the parents or the in-laws because it had been conditioned that everyone else's needs and feelings came before her own, especially when she became a mother. And so now my mom is so conscientious about not kind of repeating that pattern with us. So she will do the same thing. My parents do the same thing. Like, it doesn't have to be Christmas Day. When do you want to celebrate? And we've celebrated Christmas in January with them before, and everybody loves it. It just extends the celebration. My kid gets another round of toys from grandma and grandpa, and it works for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. And I love I think that's the thing, is noticing what's the important thing we could have been holding on to as the reason why that, I don't know, that objection or that why that offense would have happened. In other words, why would I have gotten offended, or why would them putting up a boundary have offended me? And me thinking about it and thinking, well, it's because I want them here. Well, what are you not going to see them? Is the day so special that it matters only that day? Or are we not supposed to? I mean, when it comes to Christmas, and I think one of the ghosts even says to Scrooge, aren't we supposed to be keeping it all year long? So then why does it matter?
Yes, and if you can be respectful of people's boundaries, if you're met with that boundary as a grandparent, and even if you're disappointed, you say, okay, I totally understand. You want to spend this Christmas together with your newborn baby. When can we celebrate? And you find a different time. What that means is you will all be celebrating authentically, joyfully, not resentfully. Nobody will be cold or short or exhausted or burned out. And that really does make both the event better, but it strengthens your relationship.
Yes, that's good. But taking that perspective of boundaries are helpful and healthful, or whatever you want to call it, they are good. Boundaries are good. Saying no is good, and saying no and knowing the why behind the no, even better. And you go into that in all the in that book. And in fact, if people want to dive deeper than we've just done, they can go back to that conversation we had, because we do a whole lot more talking about that. But let's get into this new Whole30. Obviously, Whole30 came out in 2009, somewhere around there, and was a #1 New York Times bestseller. Came out with the Whole30 program and everything. That was 16 years ago, if I'm doing the math correctly. Yeah. 2009 to 2019 would be 10. So then about 5 or 6 more years. Yes. Pandemic, that last little third of it, the pandemic is like, zoop. So anyway, the new Whole30, I'm curious. Obviously, the Whole30 has been a smash hit. What is there to update? Why update it? What's the new all about here? Why was there a reason to come back to it and update it and expand it and be helpful even more so?
I know. There were a number of reasons. And I think the first is just that I have gone through such an evolution between the Whole30, which was published in 2015, and the new Whole30. In that, I've had a lot of life changes. I went through a very public divorce and business split. I became a mom. I got a concussion and had to navigate this 3 years of chronic illness and injury. As I evolved as a person, I became far more empathetic. I developed more empathy for myself, and that led to me developing more empathy for others. And so the tone in which I speak about the Whole30, write about the Whole30, guide people through the Whole30 has changed dramatically. If you talked to 2015 Melissa, I would have said something like, this is not hard. Drinking your coffee black is not hard. Quitting heroin? Sure, that's hard. But you can do this. And it's the most worthy cause on earth. It's the only body you'll ever have. I had no acknowledgement of my own privilege. There was no acknowledgement that other people had such a different lived experience, that what I was doing as a child-free single person is not the same as a mom of two or working mother of two. So as my voice changed and evolved, I knew that the way I wanted to present people to the Whole30 and guide and lead them through it also changed. It was going to be, and it is, far more welcoming, far more inclusive. The language is still direct because I don't know how to speak otherwise, but it is far more kind and understanding. And there's a lot more of this, like, we just need to let good enough be good enough. We don't need to be perfect. So that was a really important impetus for me wanting to rewrite it. And I did rewrite it. I did not go to the original book and take a chapter and update it. I put the book away and I said, how would I talk about the Whole30 now, start to finish? So that, I think, is the first reason. And that feels really important to me. And a lot of Whole30ers have commented that this book just feels more realistic and the program feels so much more doable, even though the rules haven't changed. Just the way that I'm approaching it now makes it feel so much more accessible.
That's interesting. Yeah. You saying that brings to mind, and I don't know how familiar you are. I know the audience for this show is familiar with David Allen, Getting Things Done. And he came out with that first book back in 2001. Well, he came out with a brand new version. And I don't know if he went down to the studs or to the foundation like you did, but I know that that's what his approach was the second time around. Was obviously it's helped a lot of people over the whole duration of its existence. However, people still ask questions because they just don't get it. They don't feel that it's as accessible as it could be and should be. And so that sounds like that's really the reason there. And obviously life change, and you're a different person in a lot of ways. You know it through and through. I love that you didn't go back to it. You just said, oh, I know this. Now, how would I really talk to people about it today versus pointing them to that old book?
Yes. And in the new Whole30, you'll even see paragraphs where I reference something I wrote in the original book. And I'm like, I wouldn't say it like that today. And I hate that I said it like that then, but that was the best I could do. I really was a very different person. And I really had this kind of narrower perspective. And I wish I hadn't, but here's how I would say it today. And people really resonated with that. So, that was, I think, the biggest reason. But also, maybe equally large, is that the science has changed a lot in the last 10 years. Our understanding of nutrition science, new studies, new research, a better understanding of existing studies and research. And so as that evolves, we also have to evolve our position of the foods that you eliminate, of the explanation of why you might eliminate some of these foods. Some of the foods that we originally eliminated back in 2015, we no longer do, because we now understand with a larger body and depth of research that these foods aren't problematic enough to pull them out of our elimination phase. So there have been, I think, 8 rule changes between 2015 and 2025 now that are all documented in the new book with, really robust scientific backing. So I wanted to update that,
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can't remember if the first book accommodated for even some of the things like vegans or vegetarians or omnivores, which I know you address here. How do you address that this time?
Yes. So that was the third big reason, is that the original Whole30 did not accommodate if you did not eat any animal protein. And we tried. We always said you were welcome in our community, but we also said, but you can't really do the Whole30 because, we eliminate basically all of your plant-based protein sources. But we had enough people who wanted to go through the elimination and reintroduction to be part of the community, to gain those learnings, but they wanted to do so within their own set of dietary values. So in 2020, we began working on a plant-based version of the Whole30. We released it in 2022, and it only existed on our website until the new Whole30 book, where it's explained in detail. There's so much support. There's a meal template and a shopping list and 50 plus new recipes specific to that aspect. So for the first time, I really can say we are fully supportive of our vegetarian and vegan friends or anybody who's just interested in exploring a plant-based approach.
Okay, so somebody has never heard of you, has never heard the Whole30, although I'm kind of like, how? But how have you not? But even if, or they've heard it maybe just in passing. They've heard somebody say they're doing it, and they've always been kind of curious. I know we did kind of a brief synopsis of what it is and how it works, but let's just expand. Let's dive deep. Let's expand. Let's give them why would they want to do this, and how would they start to do those beginning preparatory psychological / logistical preparations in order to do this?
Every dietitian in the world says there is no one size fits all when it comes to diet and nutrition. You have to do what works for you. And people go, yeah, that makes so much sense. I love that concept of bioindividuality, but how do I figure out what works for me? And so Whole30 is really the answer to how. There could be foods that are having a negative impact on your energy, your sleep, digestion, any number of medical symptoms, from asthma to allergies to tendinitis to anxiety to migraines to hot flashes, in ways that you might not associate with your diet. So if someone has a hacking cough and you say to them, you should probably stop smoking, they go, yeah, that makes sense. But when my mom had such terrible shoulder tendinitis that she couldn't even take off her own shirt, and I said to her, I wonder if you're sensitive to gluten or dairy, she was like, I don't understand how that works. That makes no sense. But food sensitivities impact different people in different ways. So the easiest and most accessible way to see if you have any hidden food sensitivities is to do an elimination and reintroduction program like ours. You know, elimination diets have been around since the 1920s. They're still often considered the gold standard for identifying food sensitivities, but they're not always easy to complete. A lot of people don't have the time, the resources, or the access to a registered dietitian to walk them through an elimination program. So we provide the basic framework and structure for you to do it on your own. And there's resources to support it, and recipes, and an email newsletter, and products, and like this full universe of things to support you as you go through this program that's been around now for 16 years.
If somebody's listening to this in around the holidays, probably not the perfect time to be starting. However, a lot of people like to do dry January, for example. They like to do that. And that actually is a form of elimination. It's going without alcohol. I mean, the thing is like some people, that's how they realize, wait a second, I could possibly do sobriety. I should maybe consider how long I can do February and March and so on. Now, that's not what we're saying here. That's a different thing. But January is kind of a perfect time, right?
Yes, we run group Whole30s every January, and it is, of course, our biggest month. We are starting on January 2nd, and when we do a group Whole30, it basically just means that our entire organization is focused on guiding and leading people through the program, and we all start on the same day. So everyone's kind of going through it at the same time, and we have specific resources every single day. We've got a private community app that you can join if you want kind of a closed environment to talk about how your Whole30 is going and get advice. And so January 2nd is when we're starting. And it's a great time for a lot of people just to start off the new year with a self-experiment that isn't about weight loss. It's not about weight loss. It's not about making yourself smaller. It's not about the number on the scale. It is about feeling and living better. And I think people really love that mindset shift in January.
And that feeling and living better and differently, that's in a lot of ways, that's what they don't get they can do. They don't understand that giving something up for a while to then see what you could bring back in and or keep out without it being that big of a hassle. Like you mentioned earlier, drinking your coffee black. I did that. I actually still do that. Now, what I've done is I still do that, but right now I kind of like my Christmas creamer. So I'm putting a tiny bit of like a peppermint mocha bark, something or other in there. I said, you know what? I'm going to make the exception and it's okay. And I'm not going overboard. I'm having like 1 to maybe 2 cups a day, and that's it. And it's only a little bit, and it's not I mean, I don't feel like I'm like addicted to sugar or something because of that. But what are some of the biggest hangups? People are like, oh no, I don't think I can give up, insert here.
I mean, it's highly it's sort of very specific to the person, but I hear bread a lot. I hear cheese a lot. I hear alcohol a lot. Those are sort of the big, like, I don't know if I could give those up, but I'm going to tell you this. Most of the time when I talk to someone about the Whole30 and they say, oh, I could never do that, I couldn't give up alcohol for a month, they're posing what sounds like a logical argument. So I would then say to them, well, here are the other things that you can drink, and here are the health benefits, and like, here are all of the resources we have for being sober. And then they would just say something else, like, I don't think I have time to meal plan, or I wouldn't know what to eat for breakfast. You're trying to kind of counteract an emotional argument with logical talking points. I think the biggest kind of pushback is, I've dieted before, it's never worked. What if this doesn't work for me? Or what if this does work for me and it changes things in terms of my social group or my family structure? Or, what if I start and really put my back into it and then something happens, and like, am I going to beat myself up about it? How am I going to socialize? How am I going to stay connected to family and friends if I'm eating so differently? So I think emotionally, it can be really hard. Another big emotional one is like, what am I going to do when I'm sad or anxious or lonely if I can't lean on my wine or my chips or my ice cream? That's a really big one. And those are all of the things that we address in our resources, because we're not just about how to help you figure out how to grocery shop and what to make for breakfast. We're talking about all of these really deep emotional issues that are so common when it comes to our relationship with food.
Those are like low-level existential crises in a way, right? It's like, because you think about it, and when I put in, hey, what do I do when I'm stressed and I don't have insert here to lean on? It's like, well, then what does that? Then I have to go to the next question, which is, what does that say about me as a person and my character or my grit?
Mm-hmm.
Do I even have? Can I? It's just easier for me to say, no, I can't, or I could never, and go there instead as a false boundary, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I mean, if you want to go even deeper, a lot of people with chronic illnesses are almost afraid to discover that food is having a negative impact on how they feel, because I hear often from people like, why didn't I do this sooner? How was I like poisoning myself with this food, with all of these different reactions I was getting? Or on the converse, I mean, food is not a fix-all, cure-all. And there are many things for which food does not have a significant impact. So if they go into it hoping that it does, maybe they're scared that it won't. And then they're going to be let down yet again on this quest for improved health. Is a lot to unpack when people go into a Whole30. And it's definitely not just as simple as like, I don't think I could not drink for a month.
So what are we talking about here? Like, for somebody, I mean, I'm more familiar, but for somebody that's not, what exactly are we eliminating, and why the duration of 30 days? Is it just that's an easy round number to say 1 month, 4 weeks, etc.?
Yes. So 30 days, it's not like a magical number, but there is some habit research in there. So habit research shows that the number of days it takes to successfully ingrain a habit varies widely, based mostly on the emotional attachment you have to that habit. So if you pick a habit like, I'm going to drink a glass of water every morning, there's very little emotional attachment to that. You can probably groove that habit with some conscientiousness in just a couple days. Whereas quitting smoking can take like 88 days to groove, because that is a highly emotionally attached habit. Food probably falls closer to the smoking end. However, if we do an elimination phase for, say, 66 days, which was the average of this one study I read, that's tough. That's over 2 months of elimination. And then if you add on the 10 plus days of reintroduction, you're kind of in it now for almost 3 months. And that feels highly inaccessible for a lot of people if you travel for work, if there's a holiday or a special event. So we settled on 30 because it is accessible. People go, yeah, I could do that for 30 days. And we see dramatic, like life-changing results by the end of those 30 days. It is long enough that people see results and short enough that people can access it. And then sneaky, when you add on the 10 to 14 days of reintroduction, you're like 3/4 of the way to those 66 days.
That's sneaky. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that reintroduction phase where you're not just, oh, you've lifted the veil and everything's welcome back in. It's incremental. It's I mean, and that's 2 more weeks right there. So that's great.
Yeah. And it is fun. Reintroduction is fun, but you do have to go through it very carefully and systematically. So you ask what you eliminate. And so this is the list. I'll share it. It might sound scary at first, but I promise we will help you through it. But you're eliminating all forms of added sugar, real and artificial. So if there's added sugar on the ingredient panel, it's out for the duration of your Whole30. You're eliminating all alcohol. That probably goes without saying. You're eliminating all grains. So that would be wheat, rye, barley, corn, rice, quinoa, oats for 30 days. Also legumes. So beans, peas, lentils, soy, peanuts. And then finally, the last category, with a few tiny exceptions, would be dairy. So cheese and milk and ice cream and yogurt and those kinds of things. So it's important, though, for me here to add that we are not eliminating these food groups because they're bad. There are a lot of health-promoting properties in these food groups, most of them at least. I'm not sure about alcohol. We are eliminating them because the scientific literature and our clinical experience shows they are commonly problematic. So we're just going to use this self-experiment to determine if they're problematic for you. If you get to the other side of reintroduction and you realize that gluten and dairy and peanut butter work great for you, awesome. That is such valuable intel so that no matter what the next influencer or Time magazine says about the health promoting or, deleterious effects of gluten, you can go, well, I tested it. I know it works great for me, so I'm going to keep on eating it because I enjoy it. Conversely, if you reintroduce something and discover that it has a negative effect, like dairy, but you really love ice cream, you can still eat ice cream. You can just modulate where and when and how much so that you minimize the downsides as you enjoy this food that you love. That's what the Whole30 helps you to do.
And there's some good dairy-free options out there in terms of ice cream. I mean, my wife did just dairy-free. My wife predates Whole30 in terms of the release of the book with her celiac diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So no gluten, in other words, and that eliminates a lot. However, then there's gluten-free versions of things. She's not it's not a preference. It's an actual thing. It's a real thing. So, but before that, but then even with that, she had at some point, I need to pick and choose some things. So she went without dairy for, I think, month. Well, I don't know how many months. I won't speak for her. It was at least 4 or 5 months probably. And then she was able to slowly reintroduce it and have it at certain times without it being a staple. And it didn't affect her the way it used to. And so that's good. I mean, and the thing is she looks great, feels great, all the things she would say so. And so I'm very happy for that. And I think that's what we want to get to with this.
Exactly. Again, there is no one size fits all. No two people's food freedom diets will look the same because the same foods are not worth it for the same people and they affect everybody differently. But the point is, after your Whole30 is over, I want you to make your diet as broad and joyful and sustainable as possible. If you get through reintroduction and realize that a specific food or ingredient doesn't affect you or doesn't affect you to the degree that it bothers you, I want you to keep eating it. There is no health benefit continuing to restrict a food to which you have no problem. In fact, it can be problematic to restrict foods for no reason that can lead to disordered thinking patterns around food and eating. So after your Whole30 is over, make your diet as broad and joyful and sustainable as possible while continuing to feel exactly as good as you want to feel. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that it's not restrictive in perpetuity. It's like you already know, okay, I'm going into a limited tunnel. The visibility will be limited, but then when I get to the other side, and the thing is that honestly, and I'm speaking to more blunt Melissa from drink your coffee. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I would say it's probably not that hard, but I would say to others, there are other people who will walk with you through it and make it not as hard, or encourage you and uplift you through the time that may be hard. It might be harder for you than somebody else. Who knows? Yeah. But that's okay. We're just like all our diets are different, all our temperaments and all our issues, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, they're all different, but we're still all this, amalgamation of those. We're not just our issues. I'm making it sound like that. It's hilarious. We're not just our issues. And I think through this, you'll see that, I guess is the best way to put that, right?
Yes. I will say this, the Whole30 is hard, and it will be hard in different ways for different people to different degrees, right? Nobody's going to breeze through it without any planning, preparation, or thought process. However, there is something to be said for your sense of self-confidence and self-efficacy for you to make a promise to yourself, to keep that promise to yourself even when it gets hard, and to come out on the other side saying, that was hard and I did it. I said I was going to do it and I did it. I see that self-confidence and self-efficacy spill over into every area of people's lives. The Whole30 is about food, but it's about so much more than just food. And the benefits that you get from the program, not just the physical, imagine what you could do with your life if you had more energy. If you were sleeping great as soon as you went to bed and then you woke up with no alarm, if your digestion was smooth, if your cravings were non-existent or, really tame, imagine how different your life could be. And now imagine this sense of self-confidence, I did that thing that was hard. What else can I do? What else could I do? And I see people taking that in so many different directions that I never expected in the earliest days of Whole30 in ways that are truly life-changing.
That right there, without finding, if you found nothing out, if there's nothing, you have no aversions to anything, although I would say that probably the added sugar, you could probably still do without. But even if that doesn't bother you, you have no inflammation, list off all the different things. None of that applies to you. What you just said applies to everyone, I think. And that right there is the reason to do it, if nothing else.
Yes, I could not agree more. First of all, if you get to the end of reintroduction and nothing bothers you, that's super valuable intel as well. So either way, you will learn something valuable about the way food impacts you. But the idea of being part of this inclusive, welcoming community, the idea of feeling like you're doing something that's bigger than yourself, that's what the January Whole30 feels like. Getting through with that support and accountability, learning how to set boundaries, because I'm telling you, the Whole30 is basically a boundary bootcamp. You're going to have to figure out what to say when people say, do you want a glass of wine? Or would you like a slice of pizza? Or, can I bring you a cookie? You're going to get through that and really be a very different person on the other end. You will establish this new normal that will carry you through to some degree the rest of your life. It's kind of remarkable, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and like we say, well, like a lot of people say in January, new year, new you. And this is honestly one of those really good ways to kick off a year, proving that you can do this. And then maybe gather some extra data along the way for further research, further study, et cetera, that will, again, limiting that sugar and also some of that brain fog. I think, man, you're talking about setting your year up for a kickstart.
I know. No longer needing that 2 p.m. kick of sugar or caffeine. Huge. I was in Costco doing an event, and I had a woman with her 14-year-old daughter come up to me, and her daughter said, I am almost done with my Whole30. And the amount of anxiety that I have just dropped in school has made me a different person. We were all crying at this point. But there are just so many amazing things that can happen when you change the food that you put on your plate that people are often blinded to when they are hyper-focused on the scale. So let's remove the scale.
Yes.
Let's go through this really well-guided and supported self-experiment. And let's see what happens.
Yeah, this is not about your weight. This is about your health. And it's not just about your physical health. It's about your whole health. And it's the new Whole30. I would love to point people to where they can find out more about not just the new Whole30, the new book, but all of the other added on bonuses and groups and newsletter and everything else. Melissa, where can they go to find out more about that?
Yes. So the Whole30 is available for free on our website. It has always been free. It will always be free. You don't have to buy anything except the food you eat to do the program. But you can find all of our additional resources and support and downloads at whole30.com. So WHOLE and the number 30.com. It's also, we're on Instagram at Whole30. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook. You can't miss us. We're just at Whole30 everywhere.
Perfect. And I will make sure to pull all those links together, put them in the show notes. So everybody listening, you can just jump in, click your social media or web app of choice, whatever, go there, connect and find out more and jump in and enjoy the new year, because 2025 is a big old question mark. It's yours to make it. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, it's been awesome talking with you again. Keep doing what you're doing, and anytime, welcome back, and we'll dive in again.
I love that. Thank you so much. I always like talking to you.
Well, that's another podcast crossed off your listening to-do list. I hope that you enjoyed listening in on this conversation with Melissa Urban as much as I did having it. And again, that brand new book, I can tell you right now, I have it, and going through it is so much easier than the old book. She really has made it much more accessible. And I think you're going to find there's something in there for everyone. And again, it's not about restriction for restriction's sake. It's about experimentation in order to see what works best for you. Not only that, but I hope you got a good sense of where she's coming from with boundaries. And in fact, again, check the show notes. You'll find the link to the previous conversation I had with her on that book of boundaries. Check that out if you missed it. And if you found this conversation helpful, would you do me a favor? Share this episode. Share it out to social media, or share it to that one person you know needs to hear it. Maybe there's somebody you know that has been thinking about the Whole30, or you have, or maybe you want to do it together. Keep each other accountable. Compare notes. Share this with them, and then it can help you and them. Thanks again for doing me that favor and sharing this episode, and thanks for listening. I will see you next episode.